So the obligatory, hello, I'm David, I work at Afterpay. Jason, what a great talk. If you want to take Jason's advice literally, how to make money with Ruby, I am working on a product called Money in Ruby. So you could come and make money with Ruby with me. We're hiring about 10 back-end Ruby engineers. Yeah, if you're interested, let me know. Let me see if I can work the slides. All right, so I come along to these meetups, and I got to tell you, I get as much value from the discussions after the talk as I get from a lot of the talks themselves. Like, there's so much experience and knowledge in this group that I really appreciate it. And so to cover up for my lack of planning today, I'd like to raise the topic, and I'd like to share some of my own thoughts to get the ball rolling. And then I'd like to just throw it open to discussion and hear all of your wonderful opinions. You can tell me how I'm wrong or why I've missed things. And that's my plan for today. So what I'd like to talk about is being the most valuable developer on your team without writing better code. So I think that a lot of the time we think that our value as engineers is the code we write. It's, the code we write and how fast we write it. And we spend all of our time trying to improve that. But I think that's not true. I think we offer so much more value than the code we write. And we should spend more time looking at the other things, other ways that we can add value. So now let me work the slides. So I've sort of brainstormed a few things just last minute. I've probably missed a bunch. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me what I've missed. So these are the 6 broad areas that I've sort of thought of. I've made a slide for each one. I'm happy to go through them all and then we can discuss, or if you have a strong opinion, just butt in and let's go at it. So documenting things, like this is something that anyone on a team can do. A junior, a mid, senior. You can write great PR descriptions. You can write ADRs. ADRs are architecture decision records, which are like, it always happens where like the team makes a decision to go one way or another, use one technology or another, one library or another. And at the time they think about it and they consider options and they look at the pros and cons. And then they decide, all right, it makes sense to go this way instead of that way. And then 6 months later, someone says, hey, why didn't we use this other library for that? And everyone's like, oh, I don't know. There was some reason. I've forgotten. If only someone had written it down at the time. ADRs is when you write down all your workings of like, what other options you considered, what problem you're trying to solve, what are the pros and cons of each of the options, and why you chose the option you did. And so 6 months, a year from now, you or other people can look at that and say, okay, that's why we did that. And maybe that's still true, or maybe that's no longer true. These things are so valuable, and anyone like who takes part or even listens to the discussion of why something is done can just write one out, chuck it in the code base, chuck it on Confluence or wherever, and it's so valuable. Creating diagrams of the system, sequence diagrams, systems diagrams, just that like high level documenting what's going on in the system. They're valuable. People always forget to do them. People don't prioritize them. If you do them, you'll be very valuable. Document the domain, the acronyms, the buzzwords that people use. I started this new job at Afterpay 4 months ago. And one of the first things I did was like, every time someone said a term that I didn't understand, I would ask them what it means, and then I'd write it out. And then every new developer that's joined since then, I've like handed this long glossary to them and said, these are all the terms that people use. This is what they actually mean. Take notes in meetings and share them afterwards. Once again, meetings happen. People agree on things, but then if nobody writes them down and shares them, what good is it? And so anyone in the meeting can just write down notes and share them, and it's super valuable for the team. Communication. So expressing things clearly in a way that's suitable for the audience. And this means you explain things one way to developers on your team and another way to the business people. And you explain things at different level of detail, depending on whether it's, someone who's deep in the details or someone who's more removed from it. If the CTO comes up and says, how's that thing going? Maybe they want to know, the deep down details of the library bug that you found, or maybe they want to know about, the timeline that you have for it and if things are going according to plan. Be a great listener. So give the person who's talking to you your full attention. I think listening is at least half of all communication. We focus so much on communications being like the talking part or the writing part, but that's only half of it. Listening is so important. Ask good questions, rephrase what the other person has said, and say it back to them to make sure that you've understood them correctly. And this helps not just you, but anyone else listening. This is a great way of just making sure everyone gets on the same page. Positive energy. Compliment people. Be the positive person on your team who's encouraging others and telling people when they're doing things well. Feeling recognized is so important to people's enjoyment at work. They say that being recognized for your hard work is better for your happiness than getting a pay rise. So, I don't know if that's true, but I think it's pretty good. Be excited about the project you're working on. Tell people what excites you about it. Just be really vocal about the good things, just like Jason was before. Jason is the epitome of positive energy. I think he's so sure that Fresho is going to be a winner, that it's contagious. And I think everyone at Fresho probably appreciates that too. Be grateful when people help you out. And people are going to help you out, tell them thank you. Just be grateful. Another part of positive energy is don't blame people when things go wrong. Mistakes happen. It's just part of getting stuff done. Co-workers make mistakes. You make mistakes. It's all going to happen. Don't make people feel bad about it. Look for lessons to be learned and how you can build systems to stop it happening in the future. Be proactive. This is something that, you see people come onto a team and maybe they're a mid-level, maybe they don't know the language too well or the library too well, but people who just offer to help out, offer to get stuck in, even when they don't know the answer, it's just wonderful to have them on the team. Volunteer to look into problems that other people don't want to look into. If the build's broken, say you'll look into it. If there's errors being thrown in production, say you'll look into it. Even if you don't know what to do, just get in there and have a go. And managing an issue is as important as solving the issue, I think. If you get in there and you sort of understand a little bit what's going on, but you don't know how to solve it, and you go and you ask people and you raise questions and you write a post on Stack Overflow and eventually someone else solves it, you've still done so much value just by managing the process and keeping on raising it. And I think this sort of shows end-to-end ownership as well, which, is a thing with all work that you do. Maybe you're given a card, you write a feature, and then sometimes people just all right, I've done my bit, that's done, something else. It's so good to see someone take end-to-end ownership, see the feature get all the way to production, make sure it doesn't, create any bugs in production, just own the thing end to end. Time management. So getting better at estimating work. You do work, people say, how long is this going to take? You're oh, maybe a day. And 2 weeks later, it's still going. This is something that comes with experience, but there's also things that you can practice. If you estimate in ranges, and then, estimates are just estimates. They're not promises that you'll hit a certain date. But I think if you're going to miss an estimate, it's good if you can really communicate early that things aren't going to hit the estimate. Prioritizing, doing the most important things first. You want to have it so that if things go long and you have to cut scope at the end, you've done all the most important things, and then the things that get cut are the least important things. It's quite often that you'll see engineers who sort of get caught up in doing maybe the interesting technology thing first, but doesn't actually solve the customer problem. And then when they run out of time, you're well, I've got the nice look and feel for the UI, but it doesn't actually work yet. What else? Oh yeah, I read this the other day. Busyness is just another form of laziness because it means you've failed to prioritize things properly. I think that's really interesting. because you see so many people who are like just crazy busy doing things like through their lunch breaks and into the evening, and you're like, do they need to be doing all those things? I think that you are better off prioritizing to only do the most important things, so that, once again, the unimportant things can get dropped. What else do I got? Building relationships. Yeah, make friends with your coworkers. I gotta say, like, you spend 8 hours a day with these people for 5 days a week, sometimes more. And Teams are so much better to be on when you're friends with your coworkers. I gotta say that some of the best friends I've ever had have been coworkers, and people who I haven't worked with for years and I still keep in touch with. And I just treasure the time that we spent working together. So I think the more you can build those relationships within the team and even across teams, and to other disciplines that maybe it might be a bit harder to build those relationships. Maybe it's with the marketing people or the sales people. If you can go and build those relationships, it's really good. It's a really great way to add value to the team. So those are my thoughts. Tell me why I'm wrong, or tell me what I missed. Throw it open to the crowd. Stop sharing. Has anyone here worked with someone who, like, maybe they weren't the best coder, but they were just super valuable on the team?
There's always those people, there's more and more coming out about it, but like glue people who have those like soft skills that, no one else has taken on the like inter-team communication. So they'll just like grab onto that and really make invaluable contributions to the business, make sure everyone's working together and that sort of thing. But like, yeah, as an engineer, like you might not notice that those things are missing. Like you might have the sense that like, wouldn't it be good if we could, I wish I'd known that, or like that would have saved me some work, couldn't have just been on the same page. Yeah, like I'm not good at it myself, but like there's totally value in that. And yeah, there was that talk from Sandy Metz presenting at the last RubyConf in Sydney. She was like saying that the like coding is such a small part of the problems that a developer has at work, that it's all the people stuff. And so you should really be focusing on that. So yeah, you're totally right there.
I have maybe a cool story to tell about my previous life. Before I was a developer, I worked as an audio engineer and a musician. And I had this amazing opportunity to work in a record where they brought all of these like the most like amazing musicians that I've ever seen. And one of those musicians was the drummer for John Mayer. And I was like blown away because I was back in Colombia. Like, I'm from Colombia in South America, and it was so weird to have such a superstar drummer in Colombia. It was super weird. And at some time during the recordings, I had to ask him like, and he was like super nice to everyone. He was like the best guy. And at some point I had to stop and ask, hey, I always thought that working with such a superstar drummer would be like working like with a diva, or I don't know, like these people who are like super inaccessible. And he was just such a cool guy. And he was like, man, like the biggest lesson that I've learned in this industry is that if you're not like a nice person, if you're not good with people, and if you don't hang out with people and just be a good person, you're not going to get hired. And in the music world, it's not like you can go to, I don't know, to some website and find a job. Like it's all about connections. And he was like, just be a nice guy and you're going to get hired. And this guy was so nice that he got hired by John Mayer. It was like, it felt like a breakthrough learning for me, because you're always like polishing your skills, right? And like being a better musician or being a better audio engineer or a better coder or a better programmer. But in the end, it's all about being like a nice person to the people you're around with. So yeah, that really, really stuck with me. So be the cool person in the group you're around with.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and a lot of, I think, much better work can be achieved when you do work in team where there's a positive energy than just this negativity, right? Like it's night and day, really.
I've got two not grads, got two students working with me, and I've sort of been the old man on teams quite regularly. And one of the things that a bit of sort of age and being long in the tooth, and not seniority, but having been around the block a couple of times on different problems, I think just being able to be accountable for your team and being able to not be the authority, but be the person that people can come to, explain an idea. You can help them formulate and present what, extract what they're trying to do, and say, yeah, that's what we're hoping to achieve. That's how it fits into, as Dave was saying, into the domain. This is what the business is trying to achieve. And even if it doesn't work out, being able to stand up and say, well, when we discussed it, it seemed appropriate at the time. We've actually got these learnings, but being someone who can sort of make a decision, or at least stand up and be accountable in a team is quite useful, because especially with the sort of younger developers who might want to, I can get this fixed, I can get this solved. I'm eager to just prove my worth. Having someone who can say, yeah, actually, no, we want to go this way, or yeah, you do that, and I will back you. I think that can be quite powerful sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I had for a long time was, if something was broken and I didn't know anything about it, or I wasn't involved in breaking it, I was pretty easy to just like ignore it and let someone else fix it. And I think, I don't know, it's definitely helped to just be like, something's broken, someone has to fix it, it might as well be me, and just get in there and try, even if I have no idea what I'm doing. And it's a great way to learn a lot. It's a great way to like show that you're proactive. I mean, I've spent this last week grappling with Kubernetes stuff, and I had never even used Kubernetes a week ago. And you just get in there and you learn it because someone has to do it.
Fixing someone else's mistakes of error, it is so valuable, because you do, I don't know, it's almost kind of, you don't have to talk to the person, but you see what they did, and it's kind of having a little bit of introspection into them and how they did thing. And maybe they did something great and they just did a small mistake, and you're like, hey, I should use that for later. Or you realize, oh, actually that's not a good way to do things, and you try to come up maybe with a better way, a better system. Yeah.
Michael, you're very quiet. I thought you'd have many thoughts on this.
He has a lot of thoughts in the chat.
No, I've just got snide remarks. That's why I want to keep quiet. But I mean, I suppose, a couple of thoughts that did go through my mind. It's interesting at the beginning, you started off about writing code and writing it quickly. And I think people find that really hard to step away from. And so often have I seen people that are very methodical, people that are very thought out, people that will take a lunch and not hammer code out and not even code quickly, make the biggest impact, actually get stuff delivered that makes a difference, have the time to talk to the people in the business to work out what makes the difference. I mean, I've seen the opposite where I've been involved in stuff where I've kind of just, ship it. 3 weeks later, you actually work out some of the things you've shipped. No one even knew they were there to be used. And you kind of go, oh, well, what's the purpose? What's the purpose of writing this awesome code and doing it quickly when you haven't actually finished it? You haven't done the whole picture, or you've done something and then it hasn't actually been good for the business necessarily, or not as important as you thought. So certainly having those conversations with other people is very valuable to try and understand your business, to try and understand the business model. And yeah, I think the thing is to sometimes look at those people that you kind of go, oh, they're not the fastest coder, they're not the best coder, they're slow, but then you kind of go, right, but are they bringing something better? And often they are. Often they're bringing some they're part of the team. And often there's a lot of learnings you can take from just being a little bit more methodical and making sure you strike at the right thing rather than just shipping code. I mean, one example is I was on a project once upon a time, and there was, I think, all up about 15, 20 people just all driving the same direction. And 5 months later, the whole thing was canned. So you can kind of go, you can get carried away if you don't actually step back, take that time, talk to people, work out if it's the right thing.
Yeah, I was reading a thing recently that was saying that 80% of the value of the work you do comes from 20% of the work you do. Does that make sense? Yeah, 80% of the value comes from 20% of the work.
20.
Yeah.
The Pareto principle.
That's a great
That's
one.
80-20 principle. Anyway, I thought that was interesting because I thought, a lot of the things, if I look back at the work I did 6 months ago that I thought was super important then, there's probably only like a couple of things that people still think are important now.
It's an interesting one that I think there was a lunch when I was at Fresho that we all we sat down and talked about it and actually said, right, so at that point there was 9 engineers and we said, okay, so 20% of us are delivering 80% of the value within the engineering team. It kind of made it really think like, wow, only 2 of these engineers right now are delivering all this value, and who are they and why are they and what could you do differently to shift to become more valuable? Because as I said, it's not writing the most lines of code, it's actually bringing the most value to that organization.
I would add to that, having been at Fresho with Michael, that constantly, like I might be involved in a day where I don't write a line of code, or I write 1 or 2 lines of code, and it's rare that I will push more than a couple of lines of code to master on a given day. And we work a 9 to 5, so with that as context. But yeah, I mean, Michael raises a very interesting point. When you've got like a million different things that you could do, how do you choose what to do? That's like the big deal.
I think one interesting thing, I can't remember where this came from, but one interesting thing you can do is choose the thing that scales. So if you're writing a feature that only scales as much as you're writing that feature, if you're writing some tooling that's going to help your team move faster, that's helping your whole team. So anytime you've got an opportunity to build something that scales, choose that.
Golden tip.
Yeah, I think that also goes with upskilling your team members. I feel like doing things that make your team members better it's almost like meta programming, because you're programming the programmers.
Gonna monkey patch your team members.
Yeah. But I think like to give you an example, Huli, who's on this call, he joined the team not long ago, and one of the things that he cares greatly about is writing really good PR descriptions. And you know, he was doing it himself, but then he was like, actually, I want to make sure everyone starts writing better PR descriptions. He gave a really good presentation. They made everyone care about that. And I think like that sort of leveling everyone else up is so valuable. It's a multiplier effect.
I would add to that in that one thing that I've experienced with this gig is full-time pairing, and I'd never really done that before in the past when I'd worked as an engineer. I'd found that, like, you know, when you get really stuck, you might pull someone else in and then you work on something together and they help you. You're like, thank you. And then you go back to what you were doing. And we practice full-time pairing, like 9 to 5. And I spent a lot of time at Fresho pairing with Michael, who I probably learned the most from, pairing full-time with Michael. It's really draining, like to pair with someone for 8 hours of the day. And one person's like operating the keyboard and the other person.
Chicken hands. Oh, thank you.
Are you with me?
Yeah, I found it's really draining to like pair with one person for 8 hours and like just be, you know, on the whole time. But to David's point, the benefit that you get from pairing with someone is being able to upskill both people. Like, you know, when you work with someone else, you see their way of doing things. And for example, when you have a more senior person and a more junior person working together, the more junior person can learn so much by watching how the senior person does stuff. And even like, you know, two people who do things differently, you can learn so much by watching how someone else does stuff. And personally, I think that especially in this COVID remote friendly environment, this idea of pair programming is like a huge one, like a really beneficial thing for businesses that choose to employ it, especially full time, because you're upskilling everybody so that they're on the same page. If you've got a few senior engineers who have 20 years experience and you've got a few junior engineers who have a couple of years experience, like, you know, like David said, you can upskill everyone to get to the same point. You can get shared knowledge, no silos of knowledge. And like, you know, if someone like Michael leaves a business, other people know what he was working on and how to take over that section of the code. That's huge. You also get accountability, which means that, you know, when you're pair programming, you can't just Facebook all day. You need to be accountable. And there is a if you think about it, if you think about how much time you spend writing code versus like, I'll just check my email now, or I'll like see what's on theage.com.au or something like that. In the past, I've certainly found myself getting distracted, especially when I was working alone from home on my own stoplight thing. It was so easy to get distracted and spend like an hour procrastinating and like, you know, reading about the latest thing on Hacker News or whatever. But when you're pair programming full time, you can't procrastinate at all. You're accountable to the other person you're working with. And this is, to me, a fundamental learning that I've discovered, which is pair programming is typically employed in certain bits and pieces. But if you employ it consistently full time, it's really bloody hard because people have different personalities and, you know, you can have conflict, a lot of conflict. That's very hard, but it's massively beneficial in the COVID era and the remoting era, the remoting sort of place that we're at now.
Yeah, I think one thing that was evident with Fresho was we had 2 starts at the beginning of this year when I was still there, and they were up and running so quickly because we were pairing. That there was literally, you know, you'd pass from one pair to a next, and within, you know, 4 or 5 weeks, you'd come back. You kind of, I don't know, whatever we did, but we probably switched about a week, 3 days to 5 days for a pairing session. And because we had a consistent way of doing things as well, it made it really easy for this new starter to say, cool, I coded with Jason and I knew how he wrote tests, and Michael wrote tests the same way because Michael and Jason have worked together, and everybody else as they kind of go through. So it's really good for having a consistent team. And that kind of part of this forming, storming, norming, performing kind of acronym thing, where initially a team forms, then you storm, and for a long time you have different views on doing things, and then you norm, and then you can perform. Certainly it was interesting because at Fresher we did go through a few periods where we were doing a lot of storming. We had different ideas on doing things, but because of the pairing, it had to normalize. And at the time I was leaving, I mean, they were, for the last few years, they were performing because they just had so many standardized ways of doing things. And the pairing just meant when two new people came on board, it had no impact on the team at all.
Michael, quick question. When you talk to pair programming, are you usually working off the same branch, or do you like separate an issue out into, even smaller chunks of feature development and then bring those two back together? Or are you working on the same branch when you pair program, for instance?
Well, I suppose the question, as I said, I'm in a snidey mood, is if you want to be doing continuous integration, and if you want to be continual integrating, then you're obviously working on trunk. But I suppose, to answer that question kind of more correctly, if you're working on branches, there's nothing stopping you working in branches. But I may as well just say the way we worked at Fresho, which was not branches. So the whole time you'd be pairing, you'd say, right, we're doing this feature. The first thing you would do is put a feature toggle in your code base. So rather than having a long-lived branch, you'd have a feature toggle, which means this new feature, this new button, or this new page, or this new way, this new algorithm for sorting out finances, whatever it was hidden behind a toggle, and you could only turn that on and off in development. And at that point, you can work on master, adding more and more code, because you've got a test to say, if the toggle is off, no one sees this code and everything works as before. And then you write your new test. If the toggle is on, this new functionality works. And then over time, it becomes ready to do some user acceptance testing on staging. And then over time, it becomes ready to turn it on to some of your customers. And then it becomes ready to turn on to everybody. And now, that's irrelevant of pairing. That's trunk-based development. There's a lot of stuff on that. That's probably a whole separate talk. I highly recommend that. We had people start with Fresho who basically said, wow, I don't know why I ever had branches in the past. I have moved to a place that does MRs, merge requests. I'm tearing my hair out half the time going, why do I have to jump through these hoops when I can just push comfortably to production? Because everything I write is tested and behind a toggle.
I think that answers it, doesn't it? That everything is tested. When you have branches and you're merging in that manner, it's because you don't have the coverage. But if you've got any material for paired programming without stepping on toes, I find that's the hardest thing to sort of navigate with, when talking to that. Please shoot them on the group chat or say them out loud now if you recommend anything.
Can I add some thoughts on that? Firstly, I'll just post this in the chat. The thing that we use at Fresho, which we call feature flags, is covered really well by a Martin Fowler.
Yeah. Love that article.
Yeah, Martin Fowler article called Feature Toggles. And so I highly recommend you think about this article with regard to trunk-based development. But with regard to your question, Josh, about it's really hard to pair with people. I know I've had a lot of conflict pairing with people. I have a very strong personality. I try and be as positive as possible. But, inevitably when you pair with people, they're going to have a bad day. Maybe they didn't sleep last night. Maybe something's going on in their personal life. Maybe their cat got run over by a car. You can't tell. Things happen. And you're going to have really bad pairing sessions with people, especially when you do it full-time every day, which we do. And ways that you can mitigate that and strategies are to ensure that you have consistent one-on-ones. So you take time out to make sure that you have a meeting with every member of your team every month. And in that meeting, you know, there's this amazing book about Netflix called No Rules Rules. And that book, No Rules Rules, about Netflix, talks about how to do one-on-ones. But the idea of one-on-ones being how you air your dirty laundry with someone so you can get over it. Like, you know, if I have a tough day pairing with Michael, for whatever reason, like next week, let's talk about it. Let's get through it. Let's understand why. Maybe it's because I was eating food while he was on the call, and you know he's got an issue with me eating food while he's on the call or whatever. One-on-ones are a great way to do it, and retros, you know, another time-tested technique in the Agile Manifesto of how you deal with this sort of stuff.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jason. I think that like maybe like I mean I'm talking to this because our development cycle is it's not even really agile, it's storyboard, you know, where you have an issue from a customer or you have a feature from the owner and you've got, you know, until one of them becomes impatient enough to, you know, either tweet to you or fire you that you're like, I've got to implement this. And it's very hard. I guess like you can't really like implement that type of strategy or that type of like structure unless you have, you know, more defined workflow or development lifecycle patterns. And I think that maybe that's where I'm like coming unstuck with this. But it's always something to read into. And I guess that's just something that, you know, you learn to mature as you need to scale with, as a company and a team.
Cool. Thanks for discussing this with me, everyone.